All right, so I feel like the shooter genre is one that is most characterized by the interaction using the mouse. It's all about being able to click on things. Like that is the core. The core gameplay loop. Yeah, it's still a shooter. You still got to click on stuff. You still got to click on stuff. Sure, you're not using a mouse anymore, but you're using the right thumbstick to be able to point at things and click on them. Oh, we've lost Deus. Oh, sure. You point and then you press an interact button. They are camera driven games. Whatever that shoot button may be.
I think there needs to be some sort of thing that you shoot, gun wise or weapon wise.
There needs to be something that you shoot and something that you shoot with. That's true. You do need those things. That is something to shoot with. Something to shoot is an entire thing that is separate to that. Or or friends.
Yeah, it's not always
Depends on
enemies.
what kind of gamer you are. Yeah, definitely still a game. There's still a win condition. There's still a loss condition. The interesting thing with the shooter genre is really just how much it can be distilled to essentially camera control. Because I want to say, like, probably 99% of situations in a shooter, you basically just point your camera at the thing and then you press the button. And that is the key to the game. You just get your screen centered on whatever that thing is. And, sometimes, rocket launcher, you got to lead a little bit. And then you press a button. Very simple. Very high skill ceiling, but very simple. Yeah, nice low barrier to entry, but lots of reason for someone to really invest their time on it and want to master it. Yeah, and then there's the neural network that's been trained to play chess better than literally anything else can play chess.
Including itself.
Yes, including itself. I mean, that is the success condition, right? You win the game, and if it's playing against itself, easily. Uh, but back to defining a shooter. Is there anything else that we can think of that is really core to the gameplay loop in a shooter? Because what I'm thinking of is you don't even necessarily have to have movement. There is usually movement, but it could be on rails or stationary. Uh, you point at things and you press the shoot button, whatever that shoot button may be. It boils down to camera control, fine muscle control, and most of the time you're at range, although sometimes less range than others and sometimes more range than others. I don't know. Sometimes that line can have different velocities, but that ray, to use the the actual term, that ray is basically what a shooter comes down to. It can be in any number of perspectives, and that number being two, because that's how many perspectives there are. Um, but it really does come down to the uh, the drawing of that ray towards your target. Oh, but I do love those old games. Quake is Quake is near and dear to my heart. Oh, Quake 3 Arena. Quake 3 Arena. Now that's a game. Yeah, absolutely. Very straightforward games, but as alluded to before, very difficult to master. There's a reason why people like Shroud are generally so highly regarded, and it's because his ability to read movement, make predictions in setting up the condition to which he will draw that line from the end of his weapon to his target is very consistent. Like his abilities are phenomenal. They really are. Yeah, you don't fluke into that.
I like the kind of more hybrid genres that are a bit harder to find. Like, what would you define a game like Port? Because it is technically a shooter, but it's also technically not a shooter.
No, I would say it is still a shooter at its core.
It's a puzzle. It's
It's
a
well, it's
puzzle
not even a base
shooter.
builder though. It's just a shooter. Like puzzle, I would say is a descriptor of the content of the game, but the genre is shooter because it's still, as we discussed with the definition of shooter, all based around camera control. It is entirely camera control. Descriptor, tag is easier to say.
Sim
Yeah, I would
simulation
say
puzzle.
simulator is definitely a genre because that's something that's overarching over many different styles of game. Yeah, another very mouse driven genre. Um, Mostly, not always, but mostly. They're definitely point and click RPGs. Exactly. Very satisfying though. I do enjoy me some Candy Crush. And that's it's interesting that uh, I don't know, is point and click a genre though, cuz there are definitely point and click RPGs. Like Monkey Island, for instance, just to grab the first one that pops into my head. Hmm. Yeah, I think with that amendment, puzzle is a good genre because one could even argue that something like Zelda is, it's a 3D RPG, blah blah blah, but a lot of the core mechanics do come down to puzzle solving. Like that is what you're doing. Yeah, those will be contentious, I think. There was another one that we were talking about just moments ago in reference to Portal. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
which are also adventures. Well, we could just take some games and try to find out what genres they are, and if they're not on the list, add them to the list. Stardew. What would you say Stardew is?
My go-to would be that Stardew is probably a simulator. It's a very gamey simulator, but at the end of the day, you're simulating farm life.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Similar to the Harvest Moon and stuff like.
The elusive adventure simulator. Yep, we sure did. Stardew.
Stardew.
Come on, man. You love this game.
Just fair. It does have skills. You, yeah, you scroll down, it should say genre. I think they had to remove genres. They may have just been sticking with tags now. I don't know if indie is really a I know indie is a categorization, but I don't know if it really is
Yeah,
a
I
genre.
I would I would not say that that is a genre though. I think it's a little
I would
heavy-handed.
love I would love for an EA to just be like, this is the indie genre game that we made with our big studio.
EA is doing one. They're really hot right now.
I
Activision's
mean,
working on a new one.
get big enough to be independent. Sure.
I mean, technically, they are independent if they were to make something in house.
That is true. Self-published. Typically, to me,
Now,
it's when you create a character and then have levels and skills to increase.
absolutely not. And that's why I want to hear what you have to say about this, Deus, because you are the guy that I know who has played the most RPGs, like hands down. Yeah, there needs to be some sort of progression. So, if there were a game like Sekiro is almost an example that I was thinking of. I was thinking more along the lines of something like The Messenger, which I don't think you've played, but it's an old school platformy, I guess, adventure game using our system because we've made this distinction between RPG and adventure. But it doesn't have stats. However, you are, you know, playing a role. You're playing the role of the messenger. Yeah. And which is why traditionally I have not thought it's a super useful genre, which is why I wanted to get your opinions on it. All right. Well, what defines an RPG then? Tell me, please. Like in practice, I agree with you, but conceptually, there's also something in my head that's just like you kind of don't, and I can't tell you why, but I definitely have this feeling. But you can have growth by attaining new abilities, much like in a Castlevania style game. Except most Castlevanias did also have stats.
We always Well, do we know any games that could be possibly classified as RPG that don't have stats? Um, if you could
That's
think
what
of some
I'm
examples.
racking my brain trying to find.
Yeah, it's definitely just adventure.
It's a grand adventure game. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Come on, those are great. Those were easily third generation Zelda games, my friend. Yep, definitely. Your stats are tied to your weapons. And I do. So let's explore this requirement for a stat in the context of Borderlands, just because it's something that I've been playing recently and is fresh in my mind. So if you've got a shooter type game that is leaning heavily on RPG elements, um, and you're getting new weapons, and let's say it's just a linear progression every time you get a new weapon, like, they're paced out throughout the game regularly. Every time you get a new weapon, you get noticeably more powerful, but it doesn't tell you about it. It's still using stats internally to calculate damage values, but is that something that we're expecting as it's exposed to the player? But Borderlands does also have a build system. Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were saying the other way around. Like a build system could be a substitute for character. No, other way around. That character stats could be a substitute for a build system. You got me confused now.
I mean, it's pretty defining for an RPG. I mean, you do need a character. You need to. Yeah, I can't think of any RPG games that don't have that as an element. There may be some really kind of niche stretches, but I think at a core, when I think RPG, I think of you get character or characters, and you progress them in some way that typically is kind of can be a grind or at least some kind of visibility into the levels that you're gaining.
Now I want to make a game that doesn't expose stats. I want to make that. I want. Oh my goodness, that is so much clipping. I want that to be a thing. It does have stats though.
You have stats and you have a
It
skill
is it
tree,
is a very actiony RPG, but it
and
does have RPG
your
systems.
squad and stuff has stats, and you can level them all up and stuff like that. And it's very. I beat the game. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Well, let's go back to your armies. Yeah, but that's half the fun of it, right? You just kind of feel epic. It gets a lot harder like when you actually get past the little starting point. If you're
I've heard it
throwing like,
gets quite grindy at the end.
um, it's okay. It depends how much better you get at the game. Because for the most part, you can kind of just start fighting the big bads pretty fast, and like they change it up quite a bit. Where like there's like the Uruks, which are these giant ogre guys you have to fight, and it's not just run up and smack them. You have to actually kind of like bait them out and then wait for them to swing, and you slide under the legs. You can like climb up and ride them around, or you can stun them. It's I enjoyed it. There is pay to win aspects to it though, which is what makes it really dumb. But
In
at
a
its core, it was
single
kind of fun.
player game.
But like it was cool. Like the whole army management shit was kind of cool, and the characters had a bit more personality in the first one, so you kind of actually care about your army a bit. And I would legitimately be sad when I was like doing a base battle, and then one of my guys would die. And it was just like, oh, but you can like resurrect them when you get to a certain point of the game, but they're like zombies and not really like the same people. So that, I don't know. There's a lot of niche stuff into it that I did enjoy.
There's a genre we missed. Strategy game.
Yeah, like grand strategy and 4X would be a tag.
4x RTS. What would you even call XCOM? Because it's not a turn based strategy, I guess. Not really a real time strategy game, though it is somewhat more actiony and 3D modeled. Taking up much less space now. That just means it has progression. Most of the time. Sometimes it's Unreal Tournament and you get the plasma rifle and then you never need anything else ever again. You have the gun.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair. Let's just say that's just short for pseudo. It's fine. More than more than the P is silent. You had levels and stats and skill trees, but that's one of those ones where it's more kind of adventure shooter than really it was an RPG. You don't really, yeah, yeah. It's just I never paid attention to the story because it was god awful, and the character themselves. So I never really felt like, yeah, it was one of those things, right, where it's just like, yeah, it's one of those things. If it has stats, doesn't mean it's RPG. It's the kind of thing I'm kind of conveying right now. Is just because it has stats, it makes it kind of iffy on my point if it just has the. Yeah. Does that mean that Stardew's an RPG? Or stats? You level up fishing and mining and attack and all that stuff. And there is a story.
So here's something that I hear come up a lot when people are discussing RPG or adventure games is the implementation or lack thereof of a character creator. Something that some people think is very important to an RPG is having a character creator because it allows you to invest more heavily in the game and do more self insertion, allowing you to play that role. But it is kind of there. It is kind of a thing. There is a number of them that do have character creators though. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it came out right around the same time as Dark Souls. I think Squeenix published it. I'm gonna Google it. It had stats on gear. It definitely also had the ability to make yourself more powerful through building spells and your ability to create potions, etc.
Um, I would say action, some sort of kind of Twitch based movement or interaction. Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, I would have a hard time. I would have a hard time saying anything is action without it being a real time game. So aside from it being real time, there is generally some form of mechanical skill involved as well, not just being able to formulate a strategy and uh, being able to say have it be executed automatically, something like that. Uh, it makes me think of the Final Fantasy 12 like pseudo programming system that they have. Um, there's some sort of mechanical skill involved rather than just telling things to do some action. You can have real time games that are not focused on mechanical skill though, like a say a real time puzzle game. There's some sort of movement involved. Yes, direct control of character. Uh, bracket S close bracket. God of War, God of War, things like that. Also, definitely an action game. Um, what else? Boy, I need more coffee. Brain's just not rolling today. But what else? What else can we add to an action game? Because in most of the games that we just described, there's some sort of combat, some sort of conflict. But I don't think that's necessary to be an action game.
Maybe not combat, but some sort of like risk and action. Or not action, some sort of like at least something you have to do with consequence. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Because there are action games where you mostly just run around. Like I call it Mirror's Edge an action game, but you don't really fight shit too much.
Yeah, your goal is to avoid the combat rather than take part in it. It does, but it's definitely like very heavily downplayed. It has it, and I would say even if you could not do combat in any way, shape, or form with the police forces that are chasing you as it is in Mirror's Edge, it would still be an action game. Yeah, Mirror's Edge has a wonderful use of color. But there is definitely heavy area traversal. No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I can definitely hear you,
Okay.
but I'm not hearing you through the noise gate. Maybe. I mean, if Raven just can't hear you at all, maybe you muted your microphone in OBS or something else is capturing it.
You had it set to monitor only. Mute out.
That'd do it. We were setting that up last night and forgot to turn the output back on.
Well, I bet you this would have been far more interesting for the rest of the people if they could actually hear what I was saying this whole time.
Well, the good news is there probably weren't too many other people to be disappointed because it just got pointed out now.
Yeah, I did see it jump up to 4 and one person left. They probably saw some asshole sitting there and talking to himself quietly, so they decided to fuck off.
Fair
So,
enough.
yeah, I don't blame them. I probably would have pissed off too. So I did add another genre. I don't know if you guys noticed, but fighting games.
I did. It did. And would fighting games be a tag as it is a distilled form of action game
No,
in so much as it is definitely real time and you definitely have direct control of a character?
I think there's additional things that define a fighting game, though. A specific round structure, a match structure.
Fair enough.
Unless you want to go and say something like Streets of Rage. Do you know Streets of Rage? I hope you do.
I do know Streets of Rage. I know it quite well. Um, I would say that that is definitely a brawler, which is very closely linked to a fighting game, but is not a fighting game itself.
A beat them all. Yeah, that's like Streets of Rage. Or what's a newer example of it? River City Girls. Have you seen that one?
Oh man, now I want to play River City Ransom. That was a great game.
Yeah, they just made the River City Girls remake of it where it's a bunch of female characters in the same kind of game.
I should go get that. I should buy that.
So, but yeah, I guess an RPG needs a story, but a story does not necessarily make something an RPG. But if we're defining an RPG and it doesn't have a story, you can't call it an RPG. So that stays in.
I agree.
I mean, targets, I think, goes without saying. Let's just boil this right down. Point and press button, and it boils down to camera control and twitch skills. I think getting down to very, very granular, very, very finite rulings and definitions is going to be of key importance. Having extra fluff and garbage is just going to convolute things.
Make things more complicated than the system needs it to be.
Because at its core, like I said, games are simple. By very core definition, they are simple, and the genres should be the same. We got shooter, we got RPG, we got action. And action is actually a genre. No, that's adventure. Action would be the tag. It's like an ARPG.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, I'm just going to add action down here, and we're going to change this. No, actually, we can define the tags later. We'll come back to action as a tag. I think it's more of an adventure game. An adventure doesn't have to be real time. So what makes an adventure game? Let's look up some adventure games. And Raven, throw in your opinions here. I want to know what you think makes a game an adventure game.
So I would say a key concept in an adventure game is being presented with some sort of challenge or obstacle to overcome. Like that is in every game that I would consider an adventure game, there is always some big overarching, here's your big terrible thing. You need to go either stop this from happening or undo something that was done by it.
So, looking at the first ones here, Destiny 2.
Definitely big terrible things that you got to stop.
But is it really an adventure game? It's an RPG. It's a shooter.
If you only play the story. if you take the story campaign of Destiny 2 and play just that, there is definitely a adventure style story arc in that you have this this big bad set out in front of you, and the game starts with you having the big bad being determined to you, and the game ends upon confronting the big bad.
Okay, so Grand Theft Auto doesn't follow that. But isn't that still adventure?
I don't know. I don't play those games.
Okay, Pseudo, I know you were a fairly big GTA fan.
Yeah, I mean, plot-wise, they're still typically like big bads.
Yeah, so you're saying it still falls under the definition?
Yeah, story-wise at least, but I mean, it's one of those kind of things where it's not people don't really play those games for the story.
Yeah, and
even though some of the stories have been pretty good, but like they still technically are got the adventure aspects too. Now they're just pay-to-win multiplayer games.
Aren't they all though?
Oh, Rockstar.
Well, I guess no, not every game is a pay-to-win multiplayer game. There are the pay-to-win single-player games.
Yes, this is true. Dead Space 3, for example.
So Monster Hunter World. Is that not an action game? Or not an adventure game?
I would say that there is definitely
I love that wording.
Consider it
Sorry.
an adventure game.
Sorry, but I think Raven hit the wording square nail on the head with world exploring.
Yep, that's a important part of an adventure game for sure.
Can't have an adventure game if you're not on an adventure.
Absolutely. I still think that adventure needs to be spurred on by some sort of consequence, whatever that consequence may be.
But isn't that just applying a story to the game?
No, that's a fair point, because now that I think about it, Journey, one of the best adventure games that has been made, does not have a big consequence as far as I can remember.
Journey's not even on Steam. But yeah,
Nope,
it's
it
and
is
it's
PS3 exclusive.
and it is about yeah, we actually own it. PS3. They ported it to 4, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, pretty sure there's a 4
Shoot,
version as well.
I
A
gotta
lot of
buy
a lot
another
of
copy then.
online games for PS3 are backwards compatible in the four.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Raven. RPG and adventure do mix very well, and they do tend to go hand in hand, but they don't always. And that's why we want to draw this line down the middle and say this is this and this is that, so that you can have an RPG game.
That isn't necessarily an adventure, but you can also have an adventure game that isn't necessarily an RPG. But when you mix the two, it's pretty great.
It is pretty great. So, as I was saying before, I would call Zelda an adventure game and not an RPG game, especially the newest one. Especially the newest one.
I would say that the newest one is closer to an RPG than most of them have been. Oh, we just flipped back to the Sekiro uh, category, by the way. Um,
Hmm?
but or maybe it's just my browser glitching out. But I would say
Maybe I
that
didn't
the
update
newest
the
Zelda,
information when I did it. That'd be bad.
the newest Zelda is closer to a. I think it just glitched. I saw it. I was watching the stream and I saw it switch back.
Okay.
Um, but the newest Zelda game is the closest to an RPG that it has been in a very long time. In as much as you do have a lot more of a progression slash build system to it, and you've got a durability system, you've got
Which you shouldn't. You
stats
really,
tied
really shouldn't.
to gear, and I agree you should not have most of those systems, but it is closer to being an RPG than most Zeldas.
Well, the stats tied to gear, Zelda has had since Zelda Link to the Past. There's different swords, they do different amounts of damage, there's different armors that reduce your damage by varying amounts, there's different shields that are bigger and better at blocking.
Okay, that's fair. I was thinking more in the context of the Nintendo 64 era games, as they, I would say, are much closer to a pure adventure game. They don't really have stats as such. You
They don't
just
have stats on the gear, they're hidden
you get
stats.
progression. You get progression. You get to feel more powerful. Things change, but it's mostly done by gaining new abilities rather than manipulating a build or some statistics.
I agree it's not build statistics, anything like that. It's gear based in all those old games. I know you played a lot of Zelda Pseudo.
Yeah, fair bit.
So, did you play the older ones that we're talking about a
Yep.
lot? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I played Awakening and then Ocarina of Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is one of my more favorite games.
Yeah, I didn't play much Majora's Mask. So, is there stats tied to gear and whatnot for the progression in that?
No, no, I don't think so.
Would you say
It
that's a
was it was very similar to Ocarina of Time.
well? Ocarina did have the different chest pieces and different swords.
It did,
It doesn't
but
ever
they were
expose
for
stats though.
situational uh, applications in order to allow you access to an area. The red tunic in Ocarina of Time was to allow you to survive in the volcano.
Yep.
It didn't actually do any damage reduction. The blue tunic was to, I believe, allow you to breathe underwater, I think, which you then, combined with the iron boots, which let you explore the water temple fully.
Oh, the water temple.
It was more about unlocking areas than giving some sort of advantage to your character.
So it was about accessing more of the world to explore.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
basically just wearable keys.
I was just thinking that myself.
Majora's Mask is the same way, but then you just wear them on your face.
I never played much Mask.
It has a really, really interesting theme, and it actually is kind of messed up. There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
they kind of throw in you that if you
Yeah.
pay attention, you're like, wow, this is some dark.
To me,
That
it was
is
just
a dark video game.
The butler's son. I think he's a butler. Whatever. The Deku's son is just like really fucked up.
Yeah, it's a messed up story. If you really start thinking about it, it is a messed up story. And at the end of the day, it's about a character with PTSD that takes an entire town hostage.
Interesting. I should probably play that. I saw it repeating the story over and over again, and I hate those TV episodes that just replay the same scene over and over and over again as this guy tries to get out of a loop, and I kind of wrote the game off because of it.
Oh no, yeah, it's not like that at all.
It is a very good game. I definitely prefer Ocarina of Time, but it is a very good game.
Okay. So, do we need more than world exploring for an adventure game?
I think there has to be an adventure. Like there has to be some sort of plot.
So then Skyrim's not an adventure game.
I mean, I didn't say that'd be a good plot. It always be like a written plot either. I just meant there has to be, some sort of medium that you're going through.
Yeah, some sort of progression of some sort of story. I think Journey again is a very very good example of the adventure genre, just sort of stripped down to its core. It's a linear progression through set stages that is very much just a journey, hence the name, through this environment. And it's still, I would say, a fantastic adventure game.
It's hard to define it as a standalone genre, but we have had games already that we've called just an adventure game. We don't define Zelda as an RPG, so it's a pure adventure game. It may take some little aspects.
Adventure.
So it's an action game. So is adventure not a genre? I pose you that question. Is adventure then not a genre? Is adventure the tag and action the genre?
But Journey is not an action game. There is no conflict. None.
It's strictly exploring.
So I would say that they are both definitely genres. And I think it's probably that we're just so used to seeing action and adventure together that it's what we expect out of those two genres.
What define gameplay elements in adventure? Yeah. I'm with you on the world exploring, 100%. Does an adventure... I don't think an adventure game needs to be real-time, because you have JRPGs that are still adventure games. There's lots of world exploring, there's unlocking areas, there's all of the aspects that we've really been talking about so far.
Oh, here's a thought. What about a game like Rogue? Like the original Rogue.
The genre-defining Rogue?
Yeah, that's
That
what he's
one.
talking about. And I'd say those are almost tags, like we've been saying. Roguelite, roguelike. They're tags. They're not a genre.
I don't know. I could argue some stuff on roguelike. And it definitely is part of it, like a tag, but It gets to the point where
Please do.
Yeah, let's hear it. I can still hear you, but I've got to go empty the bladder. So you do that, and I want to hear what you have to say.
Give me 1 second. I'll wait for Des to come back, so I probably want to counterpoint a lot of the stuff I have. So I'm gonna look at some of the.
He does have opinions. This is a thing that Deus has. Because I would say that Rogue is
Gets to be more like the
fairly
subgenre.
good a fairly good example of an action game, and maybe somewhat adventure, but definitely action. It's based around mechanical skill, but it's not real time. It is something that is focused on the way that you're interacting with the world, as opposed to, for instance, exploring the world. Although, as a side effect of it being a rogue style game, you do explore the world. Uh, that being said, I would also say when he's done with the blinds that it's I don't think it's necessarily like an RPG or anything like that. It may have some fairly RPG-ish elements, but I wouldn't say that it is an RPG.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm definitely confused. It's mostly just a tag. What I was thinking about was are all roguelikes sub of an RPG, and I don't think that's always the case.
Do you
They
consider
are often that way.
Do you consider FTL a roguelike?
Um, I'd definitely say it has roguelike elements where you die, you die.
Yep. Quick, short games, random spawn, usually difficult. Those are all tags because that can be applied to any genre.
Yeah. Would you call it an action game, or would you call it adventure, or would you mix the two up and then maybe even is it like would it be like the one thing I was just thinking of is are roguelikes always a sub of an RPG? Because that's typically what they're usually defined as because you're usually replaying, but you usually keep like stats or something the same over every run.
Okay, so here's one from chat for us. What genre would you define Super Mario 64 as?
Ooh, that's an interesting one because it definitely has aspects of what I would call an action game. It has a conflict to overcome. It has enemies that you must defeat using some very simple, mostly non-violent mechanics, but they are there, and you definitely are exploring the worlds of the Mushroom Kingdom.
So, action adventure.
Yeah, I would say that that is probably a blend of action and adventure. I wouldn't say that it's strictly one or the other.
To give you the difference between it, if we wanted to go straight action, we could look at Contra.
Yeah, and I think Contra is a very, very good foil for this argument in that it does have platforming aspects.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Ooh.
Contra technically is a platformer, but it's definitely also an action game.
Yeah, it's an action platformer, but there is no adventure to the game at all. At all. You follow the screen as it moves forward. That's it.
You go to the right, unless you're in one of the weird top-down Mode 7 levels.
Hey, we didn't talk about SNES Contra. I was saying Contra. Stuff looks
So then would we call platformers a genre or a tag?
Platforming is
I
a
would
genre.
say
Actually, you know what? I'd say it's a tag.
I would say platforming is a tag.
It is a tag.
You can have literally anything with platforming elements. Like we were just saying, Contra has platforming elements.
Yep.
Super Mario 64 definitely has platforming elements. All of the Super Mario games have platforming elements. There are platforming first-person games,
Yep.
like Mirror's Edge that we were just talking about, which we classified as an adventure game.
That's a good example. Pseudo, your point on this one? Platformer?
Yeah, platformer definitely is a tag. I don't think it can have a genre that's just platforming without having, some of the parent aspects of an adventure or some other thing, or puzzle or strategy.
I would say it's more of a mechanic that is contained within a genre rather than a genre itself.
I added reason to explore. I think that's the only wording I can come up with to accompany world exploring.
Yeah. Some sort of driving force to make you go do the exploring, unlike Bethesda.
but there's mods.
Yeah, but that's not
Yeah,
part
the
of the
dragons are
game. The
trained.
community fixed it. The community fixed the game.
That's one of the big things. Oh, here's a genre. Or is it? And I want to know what chat
Dun,
thinks
dun,
too.
dun.
Sandbox.
Mm,
Ooh.
I just stumped
Okay.
everyone.
So,
I'm just gonna jump ahead and say,
here's the thing.
Sorry,
Here's the
what were you
thing.
saying, Pseudo?
so I was gonna say it's a tag because that seems more like a mechanic.
Exactly. That's where I was about to go with this. So, you and I, Deus, have had this discussion a number of times. We think Crisis is a tech demo and a sandbox. It is not actually your stereotypical action first person shooter. Like those are mechanics that are contained within it, but it is a game that is essentially a big fancy tech demo for what the CryEngine folks could do, and what they could do was frankly staggering. Um,
Game blew me away.
oh,
Literally.
totally.
I actually got blown away by it. I was crawling along the beach right when I first started playing the game, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, the water is so. Boom! Goddamn tank, I didn't even see it. The water was so beautiful. Blew me away.
My,
And that same sort of sandbox, I would say, is found in something like Gary's Mod, where the community often is the one that defines the driving force as opposed to the developer. But Gmod is an excellent sandbox to be able to set up all sorts of games within. Like you can define your own rule sets within Gary's Mod.
Yeah. But does the sandbox have a story?
Not necessarily.
But it can.
It can.
Okay, so that's how Crisis pulls off having a story, kind of. Actually, it has a pretty good
Sort of.
story.
Yeah, it
Well, once you
takes
get into all
about
the aliens and everything.
four times as long as you should to get through it, but it does have a pretty decent story.
So that's interesting. I think racing is a genre. Full on.
Is it? Is it though? Or is it a subcategory of a simulator?
You know what? If we're gonna call simulator a genre entirely, then yeah, racing is a. But is it always a simulator?
You're still simulating an action.
That's true. You can have a very arcadey simulator. We've already discussed that part. So yeah, I think racing is a tag. In that point.
You're right. Diddy Kong Racing ain't no simulator, but it is kind of technically a simulator.
You're still simulating the act of driving. You're just not simulating it super realistically.
And as we have discussed at length before, realism does not actually make a game fun.
No. No. In fact, realism usually has the opposite impact on gaming, fortunately. But sports. So is sports a genre? Or is that an extension of an action game?
Or is it an extension of a simulator?
I'd go more simulator than action.
Do you simulate bashing someone with a sword in Diddy Kong Racing?
What version of Diddy Kong Racing were you playing? I want to play that one.
Diddy Kong Road Rash Edition.
Oh man. Oh, that would be sick. Like leaning off the back of the little like coconut powered motorbike and like throwing bananas at people. That'd be fantastic. I would play the heck out of that game.
Well, I think we know what we're making.
Yeah, somehow we got to get this IP from Nintendo.
But I'm interested because Raven, you watch a lot of sports and you play probably more sports games than any of us. I'm assuming because none of us play them very often.
I played them quite a bit actually.
Yeah. Okay, Pseudo. You tell me then. Racing or not racing? Sports.
Like I said, it's more in simulation because depending on what you're playing nowadays, most of them are just a simulation of what's going on. Like hockey and football and stuff have gotten to the point where their physics are fairly spot on.
But what about
Even though
what about older ones, more like Mutant League football?
Or NBA Jam. Love that game.
yeah, I mean, like it kind of just depends on where you draw the line for action when you have input, because then technically anything that you move around it is an action for any game. But at the same time, I don't think like slam dunking is cool, but I wouldn't consider that like a super amazing action game. I would just assume it as more of like you're simulating the sport of basketball in a fun and in a extra related way.
Okay, so here's an interesting point for you, where you're talking about the Dark Souls and then the dunking. So, Dark Souls is action RPG with some adventure element as well. Action RPG adventure. Why isn't it simulation as opposed to sports? Well, it's a character action game. It falls heavily under the action genre that we were talking about.
And haven't actually defined yet.
Yeah, I think we've even moved it to a tag, which I think is fair still. So this would be an adventure RPG. Dark Souls is what we would call it. And I think that's a very accurate description.
I started playing Dark Souls, by the way, and all I can say is fuck you.
Yes! What genre is Pong?
It's a simulator. It's a very rudimentary simulation.
Table. Yeah, it's a ping pong simulator. But so one of the core things that we were talking about in the action that we're putting the tag onto Dark Souls with is it being individual skill based. Like, how did you put that, Rage? Yeah, I saw you
eating.
I saw you
eating
eating,
candy.
and I was like, I should ask him a question.
The way that I defined action was relying on mechanical skill from the player,
Whereas
taking direct control.
Whereas with the sports games, and I've played quite a few as well, it's not a lot of mechanical skill, it's more strategy. And actually, we could call them strategy games. I think they fall under strategy game as well. They are basically a real-time strategy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. They could, like, I would definitely say that there's a good degree of sim as well. They're definitely not a pure strategy game,
Yeah, I agree.
but there's definitely very heavy strategy influence. And it's just that the mechanical skill of actually dribbling and shooting a basketball or dribbling and shooting a soccer ball has been stripped away.
Yeah, I think sports in themselves are strategy. So I think it's just because of that they'll have the strategy aspect.
Yeah,
for sure.
some more than others. Like tennis. Not a ton of strategy to tennis. That would almost be a character action game.
There is some strategy to tennis, though.
But there's just as much strategy to Dark Souls.
Is there, though? I would say that there is more strategy in tennis than Dark Souls, but it is still a very mechanical, skill-focused game.
Well, I mean, strategy in Dark Souls, I'm talking what hand are they holding their weapon with? What kind of weapon are they holding? What kind of movements do I expect to see from them just based on my initial glance? I'm doing a lot of
You
analysis.
can say the same thing for tennis, though.
Yeah, that's what
I would call that more tactics than strategy. Strategy is a grouping of tactics. Tactics is dealing with an individual point.
Okay, that's a fair differentiation. Very pedantic. I like pedantic.
That's why we're all in software.
That is. Point-based games are strategy. I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean by point-based? I'd like to get a better definition of what you think point-based is. I'm just going to go ahead and put that there for now.
Yeah, my interpretation, I was going to say, is
a game with a score,
some sort of scoring system.
Because the term point can be used for so many things. So yeah, scoring system. I like that term.
Very pedantic.
Words have a meaning. That meaning should be adhered. So, hack and slash will fall under genre or tag? Tag.
Definitely a tag.
You can have a hack and slash RPG, you can have a hack and slash adventure game, you could even have a hack and slash strategy game. It wouldn't be very strategy, but you could do it. But
I would even argue you could have a hack and slash shooter. Just very like grindy sort of. I think you could call Destiny 2 a hack and slash shooter.
I was actually going to say Bulletstorm.
Yes, very much so. God, that was a good game. I liked that game.
I liked Bulletstorm. I'm not a huge shooter fan, but that game was just fun to play. And then the game hack and slash itself is an adventure game, action adventure. If you've never played hack and slash, it's interesting, though you will break your computer playing it.
Like this needs to be emulated for like a 386, or
no, like it needs to
like
be
it will just enrage you.
No, it needs to be put into a container so you don't actually break your computer with the code that you customize in real time in the game.
You will blue screen your computer. Turns out running custom code that then runs in shaders on your graphics card is a good idea.
Yeah, as it turns out, maybe not so great.
Yeah, probably shouldn't have given the average gamer the ability to do that. I trashed my computer with it. It crashed so hard I had to hard physical power it.
Wow. When you're reaching behind your machine to turn off the power supply, you broke it well.
Yeah. In that game, you can actually modify the code, and they did really, really cool. Really, really, really cool. They used LUA code, which but easy for other people. And
Lua is fine. It is a perfectly fine scripting language, except for that it indexes things wrong.
They actually wrote a parser to draw the code in a game so that it could display loops and stuff like that in-game mechanic, and you could go in and move things around in the game to actually adjust the coding of the loop.
That's incredible.
It's very, very, very cool.
I feel like I need to set up a container and play this game now.
It is very, very cool. And I was trying to figure out this one enemy, and I played around with his code a little bit to see if I could get him to do what I wanted him to do. And instead he started going in a circle, and then plugged into the back of me, and then dropped my speed infinitely, and just kept going until it overflowed, and the whole computer just freaked out, and I was left with a black and gray screen with a font sampling across it, and that's all that I had left.
That is fantastic. I need to play this game.
Cool for teaching you how to program, though.
Yeah, definitely. Really good exposure to the basics of logic.
And Lo is here, so Lo, take a look at what we have here. Tell me if you think we're missing anything, and at the same time, throw me your favorite game. And we'll tell you what kind of genres it actually falls into under our scheme, and I want to hear if you disagree with our view on it, as well as the rest of the viewers. So, jump into chat and take part. If you want to see what we think on one, or you disagree with us, by all means, disagree. We want you to disagree with us. Just because
That is how we come to the most correct solution.
just because
By
we've
having
been
people
building
who are
games
disagreeing.
for all these years and writing code and playing games for even longer doesn't mean we know everything. We just know a fair bit. Would racing count as sports? It counts as simulator.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, racing is a sport. Sport is a tag, though. We don't actually have a sport genre.
Would be simulator.
We should extend the tag section. We should also finish defining our genres.
Well, it's a very organic process, right? It's hard to just say, let's not look at tags and just do the genres, because no one's really thoroughly done this before that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's definitely something where you hear descriptors of mechanics of a game being used as their genre more often than not.
We could talk about the history of these game genres and where they come from. Like how for the longest time FPSs were just called Doom clones or Doom likes.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that Doom wasn't even the first one.
No,
Nope. Which is what made it popular.
Grand game, though.
Yeah.
I love that game.
but your fave game is Halo. Well, that's a shooter.
Yeah, that is.
Nope.
That is.
It's an adventure shooter.
Yep. It is definitely not a full shooter. The campaign is actually fantastic in Halo, but it is mostly shooter with some adventure on top.
Ooh, that's a Resident Evil 2. That's a good point. What about horror? What do we stick horror in?
Tag.
Definitely a tag.
Resident Evil
100%.
2 is an action adventure game.
That is true. I would agree with that.
Less action than say Resident Evil 4, which I loved, by the way. Love that game. But still definitely a action adventure game.
Yeah, it does have
and
puzzle
there's some
elements.
puzzly stuff.
It has puzzles, but I still wouldn't call it a puzzle game. So, if we're not going to call it a puzzle game, but it has puzzle elements,
I think puzzle falls under, well, like those kind of puzzles typically follow under the kind of Indiana Jones adventure kind of stuff that like Uncharted games have.
what defines a puzzle genre? And puzzle is a genre. Because I have a game
Or
called...
at least how we have it defined at the moment.
Well, you can translate it to the actual, puzzles, like physical puzzles.
Yeah, yeah. And how do we state that in a way that can be applied well to video games? Puzzles.
I mean, like the core mechanic is solving the puzzle. Like the game itself will have a series of mechanics that represent what we would call a puzzle. So something that is not intrinsically easy to do and can be different on different iterations, such as having a few boxes of puzzles and trying to put them together. Each one's going to be different, but mechanically the same.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly open up one of my favorite puzzle games I played through. I mean, there's tons of them, actually, so we'll just grab this one. It's not the one that I had, but here, this is a game.
I never played Picross, or however you pronounce that, but I know a lot of people who love it.
I just love these things. And there's nothing to it. So, you know what? I'm actually starting... Okay, so we have point and click under a tag. So is point and click the style of game and puzzle is a tag to this? Or is this a puzzle game and point and click the tag?
I would say that it probably fits better the way we have it set up currently, in that the genre is puzzle, because that's really all that this game is it's solving puzzles that are uh, you know, in this case could easily also be done on paper,
Oh,
but it's something that you interact with in a point and click way using your mouse.
and I'm actually on board with Raven here. He's jumping out and saying point and click is a gameplay element. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So then this is a purely defined, pure puzzle game.
Or a digital version of Sudoku, for instance. Like that is straight up a puzzle game.
Yeah, or even if we want to adventure out a little bit further, I don't know if it's on here. Candy Blast. That's got to be a ripoff, right? Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, and Candy Crush is not on Steam. This is the thing.
I didn't think it was, but I wanted to see what came up, and
It's fucking pre-installed and everything nowadays. Something hilarious. So I set up this fucking Windows Server 2019, and you open up the start menu, and it's got Xbox and Candy Crush and shit.
What?
Yeah, it's got the same store.
What?
It's not what I expected to see on the start menu.
admins the world over rejoice. We can Candy Crush while we watch the bars move.
Yeah, like you're
I
waiting
mean,
for,
that's fair.
things
That
to
is a
provision.
big leg up.
It's weird. It blew my mind. I'm like, why is this here? It's not like installed or anything, but it's in the start menu. It's like, what?
Oh no! It needs to be pre-installed. That needs to
The
change.
Xbox stuff is
Microsoft.
pre-installed.
You need to get that pre-installed on every Windows Server image. That has to happen.
As an admin, I'm going to be very disappointed if I log into a Windows server and I don't have Candy Crush to play while my file moves. It's gotta happen.
It's
now.
like the Peggle extension for WoW. Like it's got to be there.
I do love that they've made Peggle for WoW. Just so you can play it while you're trying to find people to do a dungeon with. Does anybody else have any inputs? Any games you'd like us to look at? Fight.
Oh, hey, that's another good example of a real-time puzzle game, though. Peggle.
Yep. Yeah, and it's well. You could almost call it a real-time puzzle. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that fully encompasses it. You've got the real-time tag. And tags are, we're not going to worry about putting every single tag we come up with in here, because while there's going to be a very short list of genres that actually define how games are made, yeah, Minesweeper. That's actually a turn-based puzzle game. Nothing happens until you click, and nothing will ever move until you interact with it.
And it was actually not intended to be a game initially. It was just a way to train people how to use a mouse. So there.
But I've played a lot of
Why
that
did
mouse
I say
training.
that? Why did I say that?
I have played a hell of a lot of that mouse training. That is fun mouse
Very
training.
good at clicking a mouse.
So let's say not must-have puzzles, but core goal is solving puzzle. I think is the better way to say it. That's the core purpose of the game. You're trying to solve a puzzle.
Yes. And as we've alluded to before, it can definitely be blended with other game styles, like an adventure puzzle. Oh, shoot. What was that very colorful 3D space puzzle game now? It's brain bending. I have to look this up.
Another one that is in the puzzle genre, it would be a puzzle platformer. Go ahead.
Antichamber. If you have never seen Antichamber, pull up some gameplay. It is a heck of a thing.
The puzzle platformer I was thinking of is Trying.
Oh yeah, definitely a puzzle platformer. Very, very well received.
Yes, Portal. Portal is a shooter puzzle game. The only puzzle shooter game I know of. Half-Life.
I would say Half-Life is more of a shooter with puzzle elements.
Yeah? Okay. Actually, yeah, you know what? I agree. The core of the game is shooter and maybe a bit of exploration, but it's mostly just A to B on the shooter levels, and then there's puzzles mixed into it to get through the level. But
Whereas Portal is the other way around.
Yeah, Portal, the whole point of the level is to solve the puzzle. One that brought some friction with us earlier, and I think will be fun to work through here, is what defines a fighting genre? And let's see if fighting even stays as a genre.
Because I was definitely on the fighting is a action strategy game.
That's not strategy
side
at that
of
point. That's a tactic.
Yep, that's fair. That's totally fair. So then it's just
It basically becomes an action game. Pure action.
Pure action game.
You know what? I actually agree with you.
We have changed our minds.
I do actually agree with you. I think a fighting game is actually the purest distillation of an action game.
Yeah, I think the problem with it though is that since there's so many of it, it's one of those things where it is its own genre that just hasn't been like a proper name associated with it.
I would say that fighting is a subgenre of action because action is just way too broad and encompasses way too much.
Which is where the tagging aspect comes from.
Oh, we're running out of room. Might have to make that font smaller.
I just delete things. I might be able to make it a little smaller. I want people to be able to read it really easily too, though.
We don't adjust size here.
We don't take kindly to your size.
That is what she said.
Okay. So fighting has been moved off, and fighting is no longer a genre. Is there anyone salty over that?
Yeah, me, kind of. I really like fighting games.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me to swallow.
Yeah?
But that
what she
being
said.
Oh, man.
I did not see that one coming.
That's also what
I
she
do. I do think it is like the purest distillation of an action game that you can get, though.
Yeah, it is basically just pure action. I would agree with that.
Alrighty.
So I would say, take that action under those tags, shift it back on over to that genre column.
So we're back to this. It's been up here a few times.
Okay, I think
Let's figure this out now.
Okay, I think the easiest way to figure this out is to find find the games that are very obviously in or are action, but then find the ones that very aren't, and then we just compare those together. You're just trying to find what common grounds they have and what don't they have, and maybe through that we can find what proper lens to look at action games.
Okay, chat, throw it at us. Action games, go.
Let's start with something that we were just talking about.
Sure.
as
Tiger Woods
the
golf.
purest,
You motherfucker!
action, which is clearly Tiger Woods Golf, just the most action game that you can have, or some fighting games if you want to talk about those.
Well, Tiger Woods Golf is a fighting game.
Yeah, definitely. It is a premier fighting game title. And as we have defined fighting games as one of the most distilled tags that can be applied to an action game, most distilled some genres, how do we define a fighting game? How do we define that tag? It's something that is generally very heavily focused on user skill. player skill. It is generally real time. They can definitely be 1v1, but I don't think that's necessarily insisted upon from the definition of a fighting game. You can definitely have team fighters or tournament fighters, something like that.
Super Smash Brothers, River City Ransom, Streets of Rage.
Yep.
I love those games, by the way.
I know you
Yeah.
do. That's why
All
I
great
don't play
games.
you at them.
I wanted to clone one of them a long time ago when I first started making games. I wanted to clone and call it Surrey Simulator. That was a way more appropriate title for Streets of Rage.
It's a little offensive.
Yeah, it's pretty edgy.
Making me spit my water out here, man. Oh, we apologize to anybody who lives in Surrey. We're very, very sorry that you live there.
So
Yeah,
we've
people
got.
that don't-
What else is there to an action game? Something that is mechanically focused, very dependent on player skill, not really something that is defined by the number of players or anything like that.
So everything that we've talked about is direct control of a single character.
And success being tied directly to your skill at controlling that character.
Skill-based game, you're good with that?
Yep. Can anybody think of a purely action game that has you controlling more than one character?
It's on the tip of my tongue.
I don't think so.
Because I think of Dragon Age, but I would say that the controlling multiple characters, controlling a party, is more to do with the strategy aspects that game.
Yeah, that's the
rolls in.
strategy RPG. In the same realm as Baldur's Gate strategy RPG.
There's a game, I can't remember what it was. It's definitely, I'm thinking of games that you actually control two characters at the same time.
God of
Oh, Brothers, but that's an adventure game. That is not an action game.
God of War, but I think God of War is always single character that you're controlling.
Yeah, it's just single character.
When in God of War are you somebody who isn't Kratos?
No, you just tell what's his nuts, your son is to do shit. That's about it.
Yeah, you press a button and Atreus shoots things in the ankles, but
I don't think
you're
that's
always
controlling.
Kratos.
Yeah.
No.
The commanding. Commanding and controlling is the pedantic difference there for the God of War. You're not really controlling it.
Some game I know I've played. I know you use each analog stick controlled a different player.
Brothers.
No, it wasn't Brothers. It was an actual action game. It was a top-down kind of shooting thing.
Oh,
With two characters.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I
Interesting.
remember left trigger shot left guy, right trigger right guy shoot. Mechanically very strange. It wasn't like a big name game, but I can't remember for the life of me what the fuck it was.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a big name game, but it does sound very Brothers inspired.
Yeah, it was surprisingly fun. It was very hard, but it was surprising.
It actually makes me think Super Smash TV,
It was very Smash TV,
which
but
was actually always single character, just two controllers.
what?
The old Super Smash
I
TV.
feel like I need to play this game.
The old Super Smash TV for NES. It was a twin stick shooter, but the NES only had a D-pad and two buttons. So you played with two controllers, and one controller moved your character and the other one fired.
Yes, we seem to have lost your audio there for a second.
Really? Can you hear me again? Now? 1, 2, test? Okay.
Yep.
Probably just sitting a little back and fell out of the floor there, but I was saying you've got one character that you control, and one controller moves them around, and because it's a twin stick shooter, you don't have to fire in the same direction you're moving, so the other controller directed your firing.
How did you shoot?
You pressed the direction on the other controller.
Oh, there was no distinction between aiming and shooting. It was just, this is the direction that you're shooting now.
Yeah, because there's
Okay,
no ammo or anything like that. It was a twin stick shooter, right? It's just top down. You're running around and constantly firing. So this one would let you move, and then this one would fire. So you can be moving down and to the left and still firing upwards.
Very cool. I like that.
I think that is probably the birth of the twin stick shooter.
And it was pre-stick.
Yeah, pre-stick. It was for the NES 8-bit.
I would say that that's a fairly well-distilled action game as well, then.
Yep. Yeah, I'd agree. It's an action game. There was no adventure. Any twin stick shooter is a distilled action game as well.
Although, is shooter then just a tag on action?
No, shooter has its own genre entirely. It's its own thing, for sure. It's become its complete own skill set. They play nothing alike.
So you would differentiate a twin stick shooter as an action game, but a shooter in the more traditional sense of you are directly controlling the character and aiming in a more 3D space is its own genre.
Yeah, I think the act of aiming is what differentiates them. There's no aiming in twin stick shooters, you're just firing and running for your life. You fire in that direction, but that's not aiming. Roguelike we talked about already. Roguelike is a tag. Most roguelikes are action adventure. Most. Not all of them have to be. One of the roguelikes that I brought up, one of my personal favorites, FTL. You know, it's not RPG at all. It's totally different from other roguelikes, but it's still clearly a roguelike. Roguelike is defined as a short, instanced game, non-continued.
And you could say that it's like a simulator action game almost, or a simulator adventure game with roguelike qualities to it.
Action, puzzle. How about strategy? Well, arcade game is where the game is found. I'd say a lot of arcade games are roguelikes, yeah.
Although they well predate Rogue.
Yeah. But, and this is the thing with tags. It's the style added to the game, and it can be very wishy-washy back and forth, so it can also sound a lot like platformers. Most platformers, you go until you die, and then you're back at the beginning, and you start over. Not a lot of saving and continuing, and not all of them have codes to store a location, stuff like that.
I think one part of roguelike games that we're missing is the generated part, the randomness, versus a traditional arcade game where you're still going through the same on rails kind of.
That's fair. Roguelikes are always randomized.
Your runs are supposed to be different, really.
Yeah, every playthrough is supposed to be
at least
different.
Procedurally generated.
Yeah.
Be that a random generation or otherwise.
Yeah, fair. Procedural to the point where various playthroughs will be different from one another. So you're not always getting the same experience as you play through the game.
Like Dead Cells, for instance. It's procedurally generated from map tiles that are pre-created. So the map tiles always end up being fun to move through. They're just arranged in different orders.
You good with that description, Raven? Or do you disagree?
No, that seems to be good enough.
How about a strategy game?
Tiger Woods golf.
Also, yes.
I was gonna reference the golf game from fucking The Simpsons. But I can't remember what it was called.
I do remember that one. I loved that game. I'm not a big golf game fan, but
No, it was just the Lee Carvello's putting jump.
oh,
That's what Bart's gets for Christmas.
I see what you're talking. Yeah, there was also a Simpsons wacky golf game, if I remember.
Yeah, there's a lot of mini golf games that use a lot of licensing.
Yep, Civ
Mini
is
golf games are fun as fuck.
the Civ series is 100% strategy game. Pretty pure distilled, but what in that game makes it a pure strategy game? If we were to sit down and say, we want to make a strategy game right now, what should we focus on?
This is not a good way to state this point, but bird's eye views of a plan. Like, you don't want to be tied down into micromanaging things. You want to be looking at how systems are interplaying rather than how individual pieces of those systems are interplaying.
I think mentioning micro is bad there because many strategy games have heavy micro.
I'm like speaking more from a perspective sense rather than something that like micromanagement being a this is just not a good way to describe what I want to say, but it's dealing with groupings of tactics, I think, is a better way of describing it, as I was trying to differentiate strategy from tactics before.
But, okay, so FF Tactics is named in here. That is a strategy RPG. And there's no argument about that.
It's true.
Civ is a pure strategy game. They're very, very, very different games. And then we can also throw in as StarCraft. Is another strategy game.
Very different.
Yeah. These games are all very, very different games. So what makes them the same?
And I'm sticking to my guns. I'm saying the fact that you're dealing with groupings of tactics. You're applying strategy.
I'd say it's probably the same way that would make chess a strategy game. Just the sheer amount of input versus output in moves, kind of.
Yeah, I agree. Chess is a pure distilled strategy game as well, but it's very hard to define. It's a strategy game is like art. I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it.
Which is absolutely useless for what we're trying to do.
Which is why we need this. We need your help, Raven, Low, everyone else watching. What do all strategy games have in common?
Yeah, okay, we've got another hat in the ring as far as application of tactics. Low saying they have to use tactics that will directly affect the outcome of the game.
Yeah, I guess a plan of action to achieve some sort of goal.
Choices or planning is maybe the better term here that we're really thinking of.
I think I guess yeah, planning is probably the main thing that comes from strategy. Is
All of these games require planning.
Yep, that is definitely true, and I think it's better at encompassing the idea than saying, applying tactics.
Planning beyond the immediate term. Still not super happy with that wording, but it's getting more true.
I think if we just drop the word turn, we're pretty darn close. Because, like, if you're applying a tactic as part of, say, a StarCraft match, you may drop fire bats onto the backside of a Zerg base to destroy a bunch of drones, which is great. You're going to kill a bunch of drones. But the reason why you do that is because you want to forestall the Zerg's economy. It's not actually about killing drones, it's about resource starvation.
Yeah, managing assets. Yeah. You're attacking their macro with your micro. Is that all we need for a strategy game? If it just has planning beyond the initial turn, is it a strategy game?
I have to say,
I
mechanics
think
or tactics that are robust enough that there's not just like it can't just be. I guess the term for a lot of other games is complete. Like how tic tac toe is a complete, where like there is a strategy that will win every single time, or there is a way that like going first or second versus an AI, you will lose absolutely every time.
Isn't researching an opponent's weakness just another form of planning beyond the immediate? You're thinking about what their weaknesses are ahead of time in order to exploit them?
I think it's just the ability to have weaknesses, like be into it as well. I mean, because like in chess, like on a mechanic level, there's no weakness, but in a game like StarCraft, there are like strengths and weaknesses.
Every unit in chess has its weakness.
Yeah, but it's mirrored. That's what I'm saying. If you do Terran versus Zerg, then it's not a mirrored matchup.
It doesn't
you
matter if it's
can't
mirrored or not, though. Each
move-
unit has its weakness.
Sure,
No,
but
well,
like
that's not what I'm
you
saying. I'm
can't
saying-
move a bishop any better than anybody else. Like you move the bishop or you don't. There's no mechanical skill involvement at that point.
Yeah, it's not like what I was saying is with other like with strategy games, it's usually not black and white where like both of our pawns move one unit up or two at the start, and saying like Zerg burrow and Marines like can't kind of thing. I'm saying like there's different strengths and weaknesses for those kind of games.
So you're saying chess isn't a strategy game?
You're completely missing my point.
Apparently.
What I'm saying is when you break it down, like the layout you have is the same across the table. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay, that's like that's the whole point of chess.
That's the point of chess, but not every strategy game. And there's still strategy.
Saying.
Okay.
Okay, when you brought up weaknesses, I'm saying that like when you're targeting weakness, isn't always targeting a player weakness. It can be targeting a mechanical weakness the game has provided you.
Yes, that is true. I would still say that that is encompassed by planning, though. Like going into, and I'm going to speak to StarCraft because it's the strategy game that I know best. Going into a match, you know your opponent is Zerg. You know that there are now these other abilities that they have access to that you have to account for, like Burrow, for instance, for any of their ground units, or how fast and good at raiding Mutalisks are. But if you're up against say, a Protoss player who doesn't have access to a unit that is as good at raiding supply lines as a Mutalisk, okay, I don't need to worry about my supply lines quite as much, but now I need to worry more about my front line.
And that's in my mind, that's all planning beyond the immediate. And I don't see anybody else arguing that there's more to a strategy game than that.
I feel like there should be.
I do. I feel like there should be more than this, but it seems to sum it up. And this is what I was really hoping for, is once we get into these and start looking at them, there's no more than a couple points on any of these. A genre is quite a simple thing. The tags are all much more complex.
I think we may have overdone RPG as a genre a little bit in our notes above, though. It has by far the most notes.
So let's look at RPG again then, and let the rest of chat weigh in on this. What defines an RPG game? You can't just say it's a story, and then every game's an RPG.
What was the difference between number-based and character and stats?
We were capturing progression through character stats and a build system, as opposed to the numbers, aka if I have an attack rating of 50 and you have a defense rating of 25, I'm going to deal 25 damage.
Is that an element of RPG though? Because like I'm just saying, like it might just be the same thing as character stats.
Yeah, I think we may have been a little too granular with our definition of an RPG.
I think we can we can leave a story in there as a third point, just because while most games have a story, you can't have an RPG without a story. But other than that, character progression and a number or stat-based game.
I question having a story on there, but I can't think of a way that you can have an RPG without a story.
What about games that are more sandbox in nature, like Dwarf Fortress, but definitely have like RPG elements?
You know, I'm
actually adventure mode.
I'm actually starting to lean with you on taking story off of there. RPG roguelikes don't usually have much story. The goal is just to go and explore. CRPGs, there were some CRPGs without real good without stories really. You get your party, you wander off into the lands, and you try to see how long you can survive and how powerful you can get. I think story is more game than RPG.
It's more adventure usually. Would pull that in because it's the medium you use to typically adventure.
Yeah, a reason to explore.
I want to play Dwarf Fortress now.
Come at me.
I got nothing.
Yeah. You can't say anything about it, then it's gone. It's the way it works. Action, strategy, puzzle, adventure, RPG, shooter.
We have not touched on simulator.
And this could get interesting because simulator and sports and a whole bunch of other stuff were all kind of jammed together, and nothing was ever really clearly defined here. So what makes a game a simulator?
I'd say mechanics based off real world, I guess physical simulation. Like it has to be inspired by real something that happens in like our kind of physical. It doesn't have to be accurate, but I just think it has to be like.
Yeah, you said inspired.
Yeah, it has to be like you're simulating an action that might have been possible in this world. Not to be like jumping is a simulation, but more of like with sports and stuff like that and racing, where you're simulating those kind of events and actions. Or I should go, I think, farther and just say like a lot of these games are kind of just physical sandboxes that then have rules restraining them to be sport.
So simulators, we all agreed, sports games, racing games, flying games. But how about walking simulators?
And then there's the whole ARMA argument.
Yeah, no, I would say Arma is definitely a simulation game. It is attempting to be as close to an actual military encounter as you can within the digital world.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I believe it's usually for like a simulator game is the engines itself are built to be simulators, and then they build the games inside of these simulation engines by restricting rules and adding elements. But I think you could also put in other objects. You could turn ARMA into a racing game with vehicles based off just physics. it would not be good. But it's AKA kart racing DLC.
You could, you
Yeah,
probably shouldn't.
yeah, but typically that's where simulators come in, where they're not like the games aren't made with that in mind. It's usually the physics are made, and then they restrict it to scope to the game they had in mind.
So
Okay.
would we say then that a good way to define that is that it mimics the real world?
Yeah,
Because you could have a dragon raising simulator where you raise dragons. And as far as I'm aware, and as far as we have evidence of, that doesn't happen. But I would still say that that is a simulator game because the act of farming is something raising animals is something that does happen in the real world.
and Farming Simulator has it in the title.
Yeah.
And Lo mentioned while you guys were talking about that, The Sims. Is that a simulator?
Ooh, I love The Sims, but the more I'm thinking, I'm starting to lean more towards the simulator being a tag, but then it's so hard to define some of these games without it. I don't want to think about The Sims as a strategy game, but technically you're strategically making choices to achieve some goal.
Is it though?
No, it's I like
Yeah,
it as a simulator.
I think it's a simulator that you apply strategy to.
Yeah, I think it's a sandbox.
Sandbox was a tag too.
Yeah. So it's a simulator game, it's a sandbox, and everything else is just a tag to the simulator.
Yeah, you simulate human life.
Well, human-ish.
It's also
Yeah.
called The Sims, so it could just be called The Simulators.
So then is a sim boiled down to a game meant to recreate a specific
A specific action?
A specific
Perhaps?
environment, I would say.
what's beyond an environment?
That's a good way to. No, I think environment is a good way to describe it though, because you can describe the environment of being a race car driver. Like that could be what you're simulating. You simulate going to the track, you simulate doing practice laps, you simulate, managing your team, etc., etc.
Simulate
You
hitting
can
people in the
also-
face with a chain.
You can simulate having a farm, being a little farmer person in the cute little Stardew Valley.
So you're recreating a military environment then in Arma?
Yes, you're recreating a military engagement of some form.
Well, that's not an
They're
environment then,
training
that's more
for.
of an action or situation.
But it is a situation that you are simulating, but you are simulating the environment for which you take control of that action.
I mean, every game is a simulated environment at that point, though.
I think you're overthinking the environment part of it.
Or I'm just being way too pedantic. There is no such thing as too pedantic, sir.
Yeah, but like environment, like we could jungle up like 1,000 English words to replace environment, but it's the idea that we're talking about is you're simulating.
But we
we're
need
saying
the
is
right
environment.
word to define it. Otherwise,
have-
people
we
read
should-
it and go off on some strange tangent, and you end up
It's
with
English.
God
there is no
knows
right
what.
world, so it's
There
just,
is. It's called being pedantic. That's how you find the right word.
Yeah, but it's English. There is no right world.
So
We can
what
change
about
languages then.
what about using the term experience then? What if we're simulating
like
an
that.
experience?
Yeah, that's
I
different
like
than
that.
environment.
Meant to simulate an experience. Yes. Yes.
Because that
is all of them.
encompasses
That is all of
That
them.
encompasses walking sims, that encompasses games like The Sims, where you're simulating the experience of, watching over this family.
To address what Raven said, if survival is a simulation game, then not all survival games can. I'd say that they are. They're typically trying to simulate the survival experience. As Rage just, not all of them are going to be super realistic, but games like The Long Dark are definitely a simulation of what it would be like to be out in the cold.
Forza is a simulator no matter if you have the wheel or not. It's actually trying to make it as realistic as possible behind that wheel of that car, even in a controller.
Project Cars is really fun with the steering wheel and
Yep.
the shifter and pedals.
Yeah, Project Cars is great.
And VR headset makes it also very fun.
You still got that set up at your place?
Yep, yeah, I do.
And the pool table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a good time.
I will say though that Project Cars does. What was it? I think. No, never mind. Project Cars is fine. It's a Assetto Corsa that does not accurately replicate Mustangs. Way too much understeer. Those things are all oversteer. All oversteer. I say this as a Mustang owner.
But I think recreates a situation. I don't have a single argument with that.
Situation or experience? Because the word that we liked initially was experience.
Much better. I just spaced out on it. I haven't had my memory dab yet today, and I missed 420. So.
Is there anything else that anybody can think of that would be another genre, perhaps?
Or just any games you think fall between the cracks that you want to throw at us and try to confuse us with? Or if you want us to define all the tags as well for one of your games that you think is interesting, throw it at us and let's see what we think. I'm just going to slide over here for a moment. You just noticed Metroidvania tag? Metroidvania really describes level design. That's the key aspect to Metroidvania. It's all about the design of the levels in the game. Organic and interlinking.
And Pseudo brings up a good point. We have not mentioned multiplayer anywhere in this. It is definitely a tag. It is definitely mechanics that you want to have incorporated into your game, but I don't think multiplayer is a genre.
No, multiplayer is not a genre. You can't have a game that is just multiplayer.
Cough, cough, battle royale.
I mean, Discord chats. Could it technically just be a multiplayer game?
That is a text simulator.
Or VR chat, perhaps? Is that actually still a simulator? Or is that just pure multiplayer?
Yeah, let's try to genre define that. I guess that would be a simulator, even though that's a fucking wild simulator.
Yeah, it
is definitely an experience.
The experience of being Sanic.
Or the experience of being teabagged by Sanic.
Ever wondered what it was like to go to YMCA on Halloween with a bunch of kids hyped up on sugar and cocaine? Because that is VR chat.
Yep.
Show me the way.
Is there anything else that we feel like we've missed?
I'm even trying to think of strange games. Cheers, Raven. That was some Platinum Logi. Titanfall is a shooter.
The original Titanfall did have a campaign. It was not well exposed, but it did have a campaign.
Yeah,
but there are other genres that apply to Titanfall as well. Shooter.
Yes.
Yeah, to clarify,
definitely a shooter.
Multiplayer is kind of more on the mechanic side of things than the genre defined.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us can come up with an argument with or for multiplayer being more than a tag.
So there's only 7 genres of games.
Basically, yeah.
So far, Hideo Kojima said it himself. He's trying to make a new genre with whatever the fuck Death Stranding is.
A movie. He made a movie.
It's a simulator.
It is actually a simulator.
That's what I would call it, an action simulator.
Oh,
And action is a strong word.
You're directly
so many
controlling a
games.
character, a single character.
A tag we missed was stealth. Some games I actually really do enjoy.
Yes, stealth is a very good tag.
Is it a tag or is it a genre?
It's a
Definitely
tag.
a tag. 100%.
I know. I'm just making sure. Making sure. Action. Action. Direct control of a single character and skill-based. So, direct control of a single character, yes,
Yep,
for Death Stranding.
check.
Skill-based, you have to balance yourself while running point to point.
Also stealth. You're a very stealthy pizza delivery boy. With a baby.
I like my pizza with extra stem cells.
It makes me very unhappy that I have to agree that action applies to Death Stranding. I am a very upset human being right now.
Well, we've now angered Rage. I'm so angry!
Grr.
Yeah. There's only 7 genres of games. What you got?
We did it. We solved the games industry. We already fixed reviews. Now we figured out genres.
Yeah, I'm basically just scrolling down my Steam list trying to.
How many games have you
They're not
scrolled
five.
through that fit into just these 7 genres now?
So far, all of them.
How many
See
is
how
that?
big how
What-
big is
what-
my Steam library?
One was slightly different, but still just falls under kind of action adventure. Was Typing of the Dead, because that's one of those ones where it's a first-person shooter but isn't. It's an on rails something.
It's a puzzle game.
Kind of. I wouldn't call it puzzle.
I wouldn't call it a puzzle. I would say
Oh.
it's an action game.
Yeah, it is an
It's
action game.
action game.
You are
It's
still
just action.
controlling the one single character, shooting all the things, and it is skill based.
Yeah, it's just I guess it's still a shooter too. It's just a weird way that you shoot. But
I don't
this
think
one
it's a
is
shooter
really
anymore.
cool.
There's no aiming, there's no actual shooting or anything. It's just
you
typing.
choose what you shoot. You do aim at what you shoot.
No, you
So
just
I
choose what
have-
you're typing to.
Yeah, but there are times where you have to choose things over others.
I am fortunately in the position where I have well over 500 games in my Steam library. And as I'm scrolling through this, I don't think there is a single game that does not fit into the 7 genres that we laid out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the niche ones, like the Telltale series games. Those are adventure.
Yeah, 100% adventure.
Those are probably one of the more pure adventure games.
Mhm.
On part with like Monkey's Island and stuff. Or Secret Monkey Island.
Yeah, point
Ooh,
and click adventure games.
Yeah, it's still adventure.
It says in the title, adventure.
Yep.
You know what game I forgot existed? Hexen. That's a very good game.
That's a FPS.
Yes.
It was the.
I didn't want to bring it up as like a genre thing. It's just,
I
it's a
know.
good game.
That's the one where it's very culty themed, right?
Yeah. Very demonic. But not quite as demonic as, say, Doom.
Doom is pretty demonic. That's a great game, by the way. You have to play Doom 2016 if you haven't played it. Play that game.
Yes, that game is wonderful.
I'm not a
Please,
shooter fan.
Please,
I love that game.
please go play that game. Please go play that game. Visual novels. What do we want to call that? Is it a game?
I don't think it's a game.
Do you think it's a game?
Actually,
I think they're
adventure.
games. They're
Yeah, adventure.
yeah, they're adventure.
They're
the
adventure
same
games.
level as
Or even RPG. A lot of them are actually RPGs too. A lot of them, you play a character, you have stats, your character progresses, it affects the game.
I would say more often than not, they are an adventure, but there are some that are RPGs.
Like the dating sim ones.
Yeah.
And all those very important games that streamers play nowadays.
Some of them are also puzzle games.
Yeah, there's dating sim puzzle
Yep,
games.
yep. And then there's even action puzzle games with TDs.
Oh, I love turret defenses. They're my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
They're not often very good games, but they're so much fun to just zone out and play.
I watched a streamer playing Bloons. I used to play it, the old Flash Bloons 1, Bloons 2, way back in the day, and now it's a full-blown game, and it looks like it's actually a pretty good game for a puzzle
Always
game.
enjoyed.
Oh, here's another one that some people might have trouble slotting into a genre. Auto clicker games, idle games. I would say that they are strategy games.
Yep, or some of them are strategy RPG. I actually quite like idle clickers.
Oh yeah, I'm literally playing Clicker Heroes right now.
Mass Effect is a shooter. Mass Effect is a shooter RPG.
No confusion over what genre of game this is. It is most definitely an action adventure game, but Shovel Knight is wonderful, and anybody who hasn't played it should go play it because
That
it's
game
fantastic and the
has
soundtrack is
invaded
amazing.
every other indie game, and it's amazing.
I'm totally fine with that.
I was playing Road Redemption,
Totally
which is
okay with
the
that.
motorcycle racing game, and then one of the playable characters is now Shovel Knight. And I'm like,
That's
man,
fantastic.
he just
I
shows
love
up
that.
everywhere. It is amazing.
I guess I'm buying Shovel Knight for my Twitch or my Switch now.
Your Twitch.
My Twitch. I'll buy it for Twitch too.
You should buy it for Twitch. You should play it on PC and stream it because it's insanely fun and the music is wonderful.
The more I go down my list, the more I was on the fence about simulator being a tag versus genre. The more I go down, the more on the boat of it being a genre. Because there's games like Session or like Skate, which aren't really action or adventure. They are just like it's a skateboarding. So some try to have a story, but I mean they don't have to have a story for it to still be the game.
Yeah, it's a sim sandbox.
Yeah.
I have scrolled through my 530 some games and there are no uncovered genres in them.
I remember when I first got the scroll bar, I was so excited, and then now it's just like a pain.
Now it's just
that
like,
first
oh my
world
God,
problem.
what,
Just like,
what am I gonna do with all these games that I'm literally never gonna play?
yeah,
I wish we could give them to people. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would be great.
I would be happy to give away a lot of my Steam. So, I guess as a quick thought to wrap this up, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, we come up with something that doesn't fit in this? Not a game that exists. Can we think of a game that we can doesn't fall under?
I'm gonna take the easy way and just say no. I'm gonna pick the easy team here.
Yeah, I'm with Pseudo.
Strategy and
No,
simulator
we can't.
are so vague that anything you come up with that requires any thought, I'm just gonna instantly say strategy. Like any of those card games, any board game, I'll be like strategy.
And you would be correct.
So
I think
card
those
games,
are
yeah.
the
Let's
two.
Magic Arena.
I think I'm gonna make a weird point here. I think any game at its conception starts off as a strategy and simulator, and then gets built into the other genre.
Pretty much.
Because I think it sims something that's real world. Because I mean, humans
Boss
kind of
rush
have to
games.
pull from somewhere, and then strategy because it's requiring some thought, and then from there it adapts into a different genre.
Boss rush games. If you're setting out to make a boss rush game, you are setting out from the get-go to make an action game.
Yeah, that's I'm saying like when Boss Rush was created before it was a Boss Rush thing, it started off as simulating something with some sort of idea or strategy.
Well, what is it? I think Boss I guess, yeah, boss rush games can be all sorts of different styles.
It can be more realistic. It can be more fantasy. It can be sci-fi, what have you. But it is straight up action.
I'm talking more like at the concepted prototype stage. When a game starts, it starts off with the strategy simulation. But I mean, I can always take, like, I'm not like, this isn't a hill I'm dying on. It's just a random thought that came up.
I think action is at that
if you
core.
define it loosely enough,
I
then
think
sure.
I think action is still at that core. And if going back in my gameplay, because I started pre 8-bit basically, with like my first video game console was called a Socrates.
I honestly do
Socrates?
not know what that is.
Yeah, Socrates.
I actually had one of those.
Yeah, I gave it to you.
I wondered where that thing came from. It was somewhere.
I need to
Here
see
it
this
is.
thing.
Here it is.
Please,
I found
please
it.
show me this thing.
I used to just play the coloring games on it all the time.
Oh, no. Damn you, Pinterest.
So what is a coloring game?
There you go.
Simulator? I think
There's
that's
the
a simulator.
Socrates.
Yeah, that's a good point. What the hell is a coloring game?
I think it's a simulator because you're simulating the experience of coloring in a coloring book.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Wow. That is a thing.
And each one of those blue things is like a 8-direction mouse type idea with one button, and you see how there's an outline around each one? It pops out, and it has a little cable underneath, and one's for each player. So you can move around and enter your information stuff for each player, and then whenever you need to type, each player could grab the keyboard. Note, the keyboard is not even QWERTY.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's A,
Is
B,
it-
C, D, E, F, G.
It is old as fuck.
Wow. I am amazed.
That was my first game console right there. You could do coloring with it. There was lots of math games and word guessing
Yeah, I
games.
think
Hangman. It was made for little kids.
By association, I guess it was also mine.
Yep.
I learned a thing today. I learned that this was a thing.
Yep. I've had my share of strange video games. You had one of those, Lo? That's awesome. Did you love it as much as I did? Because I had a blast with that thing. The Sega Pika? Yeah, I remember that thing too. Pico? Was it a Pico?
Man,
Yep,
I just
so-
had an Apple II when I was little.
Oh, interesting. There we go. There's the Sega Pico. You tab. There we go. Complete with Sonic Game World.
Oh, wow. That is a thing.
Echo Jr. Yeah. This thing was a little after my time. This is, there was... I was a little beyond it by the time that one came out.
Ooh, that's a chonky boy.
Yeah. Yeah, you could clock somebody good with that one.
Remember when they used to give us like weaponry and just be like, "Here, go play with this," like lawn darts?
That's why our generation is so intelligent.
Because otherwise, you die.
Well, no, because all the ones who were stupid did die. Because it was just like, here's some firecrackers and some booze, go have fun in the woods.
Those were the days.
What generation am I? I don't know. I'm born 83.
You're like the start
I
of
think
millennial.
you're like just when millennial was starting, and when Gen X was fading out.
I got a little bit of the best of both. It was nice.
And none of the downsides.
Well, I mean, that's just me. It's not everybody born then. I'm not saying that everybody born then got the best of both. I could have very easily gone the other way and taken the worst of both and been like a whiny little bitch and everything, so, you know.
Whiny little bitch with ripped flannel.
Yeah, I didn't want to keep going. I don't want to offend too many people. Some of them, sure, but
The
not too
ripped
many.
flannel and the Live Strong bracelets and
Instead, I ended up like a techie metal Jesus.
All right, guys. I
Thanks.
think we have just rambled on for the last 20 minutes. I think we did this. I think we defined video game genres.
They've always been there, and people have always been using them, but
Now they can use them correctly.
yeah, and understand what is where. And now we can say that this game is a bad shooter game because its specific camera control twitch skills and point click mechanics aren't that great. That's fine. It can be a good RPG. And be a good game.
Exactly which game you're thinking of. You are describing Destiny 2.
I described a bunch of games there, I think. Destiny 2 is the most recent of them, yeah. And a good game still.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I really enjoy Destiny 2.
Yeah, you play it a fair bit.
It's a great shooter.
Whereas Doom exemplified shooter mechanics. Really
Yes,
did.
it is easily the best shooter in the last decade. Doom 2016 is a wonderful, wonderful game.
Keep doing it, id. You know what's up. Don't let anybody make you compromise. Don't listen to any of them. Keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm a little scared for Doom Eternal. A little scared for it. I feel like they might fall prey to the whole ZeniMax try and blandify and bugify everything nonsense. But I am still very excited for it.
Hey, if we put a bug here, we can charge them for the patch.
What are you, Bethesda Softworks?
Like seriously, people, if you don't start making these companies pay for stuff like this and start actually not buying their games because of their bullshit, they're gonna get worse. It's gonna keep getting worse.
Yeah, they make more money.
You're reinforcing bad behavior. Smack them in the nose with the paper. Don't keep buying the games.
On Fortnite, it made so much money, and it's just it's so bad for the gaming industry.
Is it though?
Yeah, because everything. I think that drives the whole pay to win.
No, it's not a UFO.
Fortnite,
the game itself
as a game is fine.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm talking
think
about
there's
the
any
profit
problem.
model. But my point was, it made so much money as the example. It makes over $1 billion.
It's actually this image.
But not from sales of the game. I'm talking about like the
being microtransaction fueled,
gambling for kids.
Yeah, and that is definitely not to get into that whole topic tonight because I can go on for it, go on about it for hours.
I can see that,
but it is something that needs to stop. It has to stop. There's no way that this can go on.
Okay, so on that note, next week, let's talk about microtransaction gambling.
Let's just talk about monetization in general for video games. Let's not
modern monetization
into microtransaction. Let's talk about monetization.
But we will definitely talk about the current trends of the industry, and at the same time, we'll tell you which production company or producers and which development companies, management places, who's making the decisions for this, and how to know if they're involved in a game, basically. There's certain names you can watch for and say, they're fucked up, and stop buying that product for a while. And if everybody actually does this, the gaming industry will turn around. And we'll throw some numbers around and actually give you a decent idea of what's
I
going
think
on.
I think unfortunately, yeah, we'll talk about it more, but it's one of the things that I think it's still unfortunately there's going to have to be like legislation. It's
Yeah,
gotta
no,
be
there
done.
definitely there's going to need to be legal actions and stuff to change to stop these companies from exploiting kids, but we'll get into that more next week. Should be a really interesting talk, and we really hope to see you there. Thank you again for joining us. This has been another Games by Design panel. I'm Deus.
I am Rage.
And I am Suda.
We'll see you again next week. Have a good night.